Imagine it is the year 476 AD. You are a citizen of the Roman Empire, living in a villa outside of Ravenna. Contrary to what the Hollywood blockbusters might suggest, the world didn't end in a wall of fire. There was no cinematic slow-motion shot of the last crown hitting the floor. In fact, for many, it simply felt like a Tuesday. The fall of Rome wasn't a single event. It was a grinding, generational entropy. It was the slow realization that the roads weren't being repaired anymore, that the currency in your pocket bought half of what it did last year, and that the people in charge were more interested in their own survival than the survival of the civilization they led. As we stand on the precipice of 2026, the air feels strangely familiar. We are not facing a barbarian invasion at the gates, but we are facing something perhaps more dangerous, the internal obsolescence of our systems. Today, we explore why this era isn't the end of the world, but why it might feel exactly like the end of the Roman one. There is a theory that civilizations collapse not because they grow weak, but because they become too complex. Look at Rome. The empire didn't fall for a lack of power, but because its administrative machine became so bloated that it could no longer sustain itself. To solve a problem, Rome added a layer of bureaucracy. To fund that bureaucracy, they added a layer of taxation. To enforce that taxation, they added a layer of military presence. Eventually, the cost of maintaining the system exceeded the benefits the system provided. Look at our world today. We have reached a point of hyper-complexity. Our supply chains are so optimized that a single ship stuck in a canal or a single factory in Asia can cripple global markets. Our digital lives are managed by algorithms that even their creators no longer fully understand. Our legal and financial systems are so dense that the average citizen cannot navigate them without a specialized priest class of lawyers and consultants. Like the Romans of the 5th century, we are finding that adding more system no longer solves our problems, it only creates new ones. In this current climate, the fragility of this complexity is becoming impossible to ignore. When the machine becomes too heavy for its own gears, it doesn't just slow down, it starts to tear itself apart. If you want to understand the soul of an empire, look at its money. In the early days of Rome, the denarius was 95% pure silver. By the end, it was little more than copper with a thin silver wash. The state was broke, so it lied to its people about the value of their labor. This led to a psychological break. When the money dies, the future dies with it. Presently, we are experiencing the copper wash of the digital age. We have moved from a world of tangible assets to a world of digital debt in inflationary spirals. Whether it is the skyrocketing cost of housing that makes ownership a medieval dream, or the feeling that your paycheck is being devalued by forces beyond your control, the sensation is Roman. When the Romans realized their money was a lie, they stopped investing in the long term. They stopped building monuments. They stopped caring about the res publica, the public thing. They turned inward. They focused on immediate survival. As we move forward, we see the same retreat. A generation that cannot afford the American dream or the European promise is a generation that has no stake in the empire's survival. Rome was more than just marble and legions. It was an idea. It was the belief that being a Roman meant something, that you were part of a grand, law-abiding narrative that would last forever. By the fall, that narrative had fractured. The elite were living in gated villas, completely detached from the struggles of the commoners. The middle class had been taxed out of existence. The empire was no longer a community. It was a tax extraction machine. Does this sound familiar? In our current time, the shared narrative of the West is in a state of advanced decay. We are no longer a civitas working toward a common goal. We are a collection of polarized tribes huddled in digital silos, viewing our neighbors as barbarians. When the internal story of a civilization dies, when we no longer agree on what is true, what is good, or what we are building together, the walls don't need to be knocked down from the outside, they are already hollow. When we think of the barbarians who sacked Rome, we imagine fur-clad warriors with axes, but to the Romans, a barbarian was simply anyone who lived outside the civitas, anyone who didn't share their language, their laws, or their logic. The collapse happened when these outsiders were no longer at the gates, but had become an integral yet unassimilated part of the Roman military and economy. In the digital age, our new barbarian threat is internal. We are seeing the rise of parallel societies. Thanks to the fracturing of the internet, we no longer share a common reality. One half of the population lives in one empire of information, while the other half lives in its bitter rival. In the 5th century, the Roman central government lost the ability to enforce a single law across its territories. Today, our central institutions are losing the ability to enforce a single truth. When the barbarians of misinformation and algorithmic tribalism take over the town square, the empire doesn't fall to a foreign power, it falls to its own inability to communicate. We are becoming a collection of warring tribes sharing the same geographic space, but living in entirely different centuries of the mind. As the Roman state collapsed, the middle-class officials fled the cities to escape crushing taxes. They sought protection on the fortified estates of the wealthy elite. In exchange for safety and a plot of land to farm, they surrendered their status as free citizens and became coloni, the precursors to medieval serfs. They traded agency for security. We are now witnessing the birth of digital neo-feudalism. Ownership is becoming a luxury of the past. We no longer own our software, we rent it. We no longer own our music or movies, we subscribe to them. Even the concept of home ownership is being replaced by corporate-owned rental empires. The subscription economy is the 21st century version of the feudal manor. We pay rent to digital landlords, Google, Amazon, Apple, and BlackRock, for the right to exist in the modern world. Just as the Roman peasant became tied to the land, the modern citizen is becoming tied to the platform. If you lose your account, you lose your livelihood, your social status, and your history. Increasingly, the realization will hit: we are no longer citizens of a republic, we are users of a service, and users have no rights, only terms and conditions. Rome's greatest strength was also its greatest weakness, an abundance of cheap slave labor. Because the elite had slaves to do everything, they had no incentive to innovate. Why build a steam engine or a complex machine when you can simply throw 1,000 humans at a problem? This led to technological stagnation. In this new era, artificial intelligence is our new slave labor. We're delegating our thinking, our writing, our art, and our decision-making to the machine. While this promises efficiency, it carries a Roman risk: the atrophy of the human spirit. If the machine does the work, the citizen becomes a proletarian in the original Roman sense, someone whose only value to the state is to consume and reproduce. When the Romans stopped being doers and became mere consumers of bread and circuses, the empire was already dead. It just hadn't stopped moving yet. As AI begins to hollow out the professional class, we will face the same existential crisis. What is a citizen for, if not to contribute something uniquely human to the state? The fall of Rome wasn't a tragedy for everyone. For many peasants, the end of the empire meant the end of the tax collector. It meant a smaller, more local, and more manageable world. It was the beginning of the Middle Ages, a time of intense faith, local community, and a slower pace of life. If 2026 is our 476 AD, then perhaps our task is not to save the empire, but to prepare for the Renaissance that follows. We must learn to own our tools, protect our truths, and rediscover what it means to be a human being in a world that wants us to be merely a user. The past isn't gone. It's simply waiting to be rediscovered. And as the sun sets on the Pax Moderna, we might find that the medieval mindset is exactly what we need to survive the coming night.